Number the Stars by Lois Lowry. Selection illustrated by James Bentley. Essential question. How did the courageous acts of people in the past affect history? With Nazi soldiers occupying Copenhagen, Denmark in 1943, Anne-Marie Johansen travels with her mother and younger sister, Kirsty, to her Uncle Henrik's house on the Danish coast. Uncle Henrik and Peter Nielsen, the fiancé of Anne-Marie's older sister, are helping Danish Jews escape in Henrik's boat to safety in Sweden. Among them is the family of Ellen Rosen, Anne-Marie's best friend. After helping escort a group of escapees to the harbor, Anne-Marie's mother trips on the way home and breaks her ankle. In the house, she discovers that an important packet was not delivered. In alarm, Mrs. Johansen directs Anne-Marie to place the packet at the bottom of a lunch basket and hurry to the harbor before Uncle Henrik departs. On the way, Nazi soldiers stop Anne-Marie. They roughly search the contents of the basket. Anne-Marie gave an exasperated sigh. "Could I go now, please?" she asked impatiently. The soldier reached for the apple. He noted its brown spots and made a face of disgust. "No meat?" he asked, glancing at the basket and the napkin that lay in its bottom. Anne-Marie gave him a withering look. "You know we have no meat," she said insolently. "Your army eats all of Denmark's meat." "Please, please," she implored in her mind, "don't lift the napkin." The soldier laughed. He dropped the bruised apple on the ground. One of the dogs leaned forward, pulling at his leash, sniffed the apple, and stepped back. But both dogs still looked intently at the basket, their ears alert, their mouths open. Saliva glistened on their smooth pink gums. "My dogs smell meat," the soldier said. "They smell squirrels in the woods," Anne-Marie responded. "You should take them hunting." The soldier reached forward with the cheese in one hand, as if he were going to return it to the basket. But he didn't. Instead, he pulled out the flowered cotton napkin. Analyze the text. Figurative language. Anne-Marie gives the soldier a withering look. What is the meaning of this phrase? Find another example of figurative language at the top of page 675 and tell what it means. Anne-Marie froze. "Your uncle has a pretty little lunch," the soldier said scornfully, crumpling the napkin around the cheese in his hand. "Like a woman," he added with contempt. Then his eyes locked on the basket. He handed the cheese and napkin to the soldier beside him. "What's that?" "There, in the bottom," he asked in a different, tenser voice. What would Kirsty do? Anne-Marie stamped her foot. Suddenly, to her own surprise, she began to cry. "I don't know," she said, her voice choked. "My mother's going to be angry that you stopped me and made me late, and you've completely ruined Uncle Henrik's lunch, so now he'll be mad at me too." The dogs whined and struggled against the leashes, nosing forward to the basket. One of the other soldiers muttered something in German. The soldier took out the packet. "Why was this so carefully hidden?" he snapped. Anne-Marie wiped her eyes on the sleeve of her sweater. "It wasn't hidden any more than the napkin was. I don't know what it is." That, she realized, was true. She had no idea what was in the packet. The soldier tore the paper open while below him, on the ground, the dogs strained and snarled, pulling against their leashes. Their muscles were visible beneath the sleek, short-haired flesh. He looked inside, then glared at Anne-Marie. "Stop crying, you idiot girl," he said harshly. "Your stupid mother has sent your uncle a handkerchief. In Germany, the women have better things to do. They don't stay at home hemming handkerchiefs for their men." He gestured with the folded white cloth and gave a short, caustic laugh. "At least she didn't stitch flowers on it." He flung it to the ground, still half wrapped in the paper beside the apple. The dogs lunged, sniffed at it eagerly, then subsided, disappointed again. "Go on," the soldier said. He dropped the cheese and the napkin back into her basket. "Go on to your uncle and tell him the German dogs enjoyed his bread." All of the soldiers pushed past her, One of them laughed, and they spoke to each other in their own language. In a moment, they had disappeared down the path, in the direction from which Anne-Marie had just come. Quickly, she picked up the apple and the opened packet with the white handkerchief inside. She put them into the basket and ran around the bend toward the harbor, where the morning sky was now bright with early sun, and some of the boat engines were starting their strident din. The Ingeborg was still there by the dock, and Uncle Henrik was there, his light hair wind-blown and bright as he knelt by the nets. Anne-Marie called to him, and he came to the side, his face worried when he recognized her on the dock. She handed the basket across. "Mama sent your lunch," she said, her voice quavering, "but soldiers stopped me, and they took your bread." She didn't dare to tell him more. Henrik glanced quickly into the basket. She could see the look of relief on his face, and knew that it was because he saw that the packet was there, even though it was torn open. "Thank you," he said, and the relief was evident in his voice. Anne-Marie looked quickly around the familiar small boat. She could see down the passageway into the empty cabin. There was no sign of the Rosens or the others. Uncle Henrik followed her eyes and her puzzled look. "All is well," he said softly. "Don't worry. Everything is all right." "I wasn't sure," he said, "but now," he eyed the basket in his hands, "because of you, Anne-Marie, everything is all right. You run home now and tell your mama not to worry. I will see you this evening." He grinned at her suddenly. "They took my bread, eh?" he said. "I hope they choke on it." "Poor Blossom," Uncle Henrik said, laughing, after dinner that evening. "It was bad enough that your mother was going to milk her after all these years of city life. But Anne-Marie, to do it for the very first time? I'm surprised Blossom didn't kick you." Analyze the text. Understanding characters. How does Anne-Marie react to being stopped and questioned by the German soldiers? How does her behavior change from the beginning of her encounter with the soldiers to the end of it? What does Anne-Marie's attitude with the soldiers tell you about her character? Mama laughed too. She sat in a comfortable chair that Uncle Henrik had moved from the living room and placed in a corner of the kitchen. Her leg, in a clean white cast to the knee, was on a footstool. Anne-Marie didn't mind their laughing. It had been funny. When she had arrived back at the farmhouse, she had run along the road to avoid the soldiers who might still be in the woods. Now carrying nothing, she was in no danger. Mama and Kirsty were gone. There was a note, hastily written from Mama, that the doctor was taking her in his car to the local hospital, that they would be back soon. But the noise from Blossom, forgotten, unmilked, uncomfortable in the barn, had sent Anne-Marie warily out with the milking bucket. She had done her best, trying to ignore Blossom's irritated snorts and tossing head, remembering how Uncle Henrik's hands had worked with a firm, rhythmic pulling motion. And she had milked. "I could have done it," Kirsty announced. "You only have to pull, and it squirts out. I could do it easily." Anne-Marie rolled her eyes. "I'd like to see you try," she thought. "Is Ellen coming back?" Kirsty asked, forgetting the cow after a moment. "She said she'd make a dress for my doll." "Anne-Marie and I will help you make a dress," Mama told her. "Ellen had to go with her parents. Wasn't that a nice surprise, that the Rosens came last night to get her?" "She should have waked me up to say goodbye," Kirsty grumbled, spooning some imaginary food into the painted mouth of the doll she had propped in a chair beside her. "Anne-Marie," Uncle Henrik said, getting up from the table and pushing back his chair, "if you come with me now to the barn, I'll give you a milking lesson. Wash your hands first." "Me too," said Kirsty. "Not you too," Mama said. "Not this time. I need your help here, since I can't walk very well. You'll have to be my nurse." Kirsty hesitated, deciding whether to argue. Then she said, "I'm going to be a nurse when I grow up, not a cow milker. So I have to stay here and take care of Mama." Followed as usual by the kitten, Anne-Marie walked with Uncle Henrik to the barn, through a fine, misty rain that had begun to fall. It seemed to her that Blossom shook her head happily when she saw Henrik, and knew that she would be in good hands again. She sat on the stacked hay, and watched while he milked, but her mind was not on the milking. Uncle Henrik, she asked, where are the Rosens and the others? I thought you were taking them to Sweden on your boat, but they weren't there. They were there, he told her, leaning forward against the cow's broad side. You shouldn't know this. You remember that I told you it was safer not to know. But, he went on, as his hands moved with their sure and practiced motion, I will tell you just a little, because you were so very brave. Brave? Anne-Marie asked, surprised. No, I wasn't. I was very frightened. You risked your life. But I didn't even think about that. I was only thinking of, he interrupted her, smiling. That's all that brave means. Not thinking about the dangers. Just thinking about what you must do. Of course you were frightened. I was too today. But you kept your mind on what you had to do. So did I. Now, let me tell you about the Rosens. Many of the fishermen have built hidden places in their boats. I have too, down, underneath. I have only to lift the boards in the right place, and there is room to hide a few people. Peter and the others in the resistance who work with him bring them to me, and to the other fishermen as well. There are people who hide them and help them, along the way to Galilee. Anne-Marie was startled. Peter is in the resistance? Of course, I should have known. He brings Mama and Papa the secret newspaper, Die Friedenski. And he always seems to be on the move. I should have figured it out myself. He is a very, very brave young man, Uncle Henrik said. They all are. Anne-Marie frowned, remembering the empty boat that morning. Were the Rosens and others there then, underneath, when I brought the basket? Uncle Henrik nodded. I heard nothing, Anne-Marie said. Of course not. They had to be absolutely quiet for many hours. The baby was drugged so that it wouldn't wake and cry. Could they hear me when I talked to you? Yes. Your friend Ellen told me later that they heard you, and they heard the soldiers who came to search the boat. Anne-Marie's eyes widened. Soldiers came? She asked. I thought they went the other way after they stopped me. There are many soldiers in Galilee, and all along the coast. They are searching all the boats now. They know that the Jews are escaping, but they are not sure how, and they rarely find them. The hiding places are carefully concealed, and often we pile dead fish on the deck as well. They hate getting their shiny boots dirtied. He turned his head toward her and grinned. Anne-Marie remembered the shiny boots confronting her on the dark path. Uncle Henrik, she said, I'm sure you are right, that I shouldn't know everything. But please, would you tell me about the handkerchief? I knew it was important. The packet. And that's why I ran through the woods to take it to you. But I thought maybe it was a map. How could a handkerchief be important? He set the filled pail aside and began to wash the cow's udder with the damp cloth. Very few people know about this, Anne-Marie, he said with a serious look. But the soldiers are so angry about the escaping Jews, and the fact that they can't find them, that they have just started using trained dogs. They had dogs, the ones who stopped me on the path. Uncle Henrik nodded. The dogs are trained to sniff about and find where people are hidden. It happened just yesterday on 2 boats. Those dogs, they go right through dead fish to the human scent. We were all very, very worried. We thought it meant the end of the escape to Sweden by boat. It was Peter who took the problem to scientists and doctors. Some very fine minds have worked night and day trying to find a solution. And they have created a special drug. I don't know what it is, but it was in the handkerchief. It attracts the dogs, but when they sniff at it, it ruins their sense of smell. Imagine that. Anne-Marie remembered how the dogs had lunged at the handkerchief, smelled it, and then turned away. Now, thanks to Peter, we will each have such a handkerchief, each boat captain. When the soldiers board our boats, we will simply pull the handkerchiefs out of our pockets. The Germans will probably think we all have bad colds. The dogs will sniff about, sniff the handkerchiefs we are holding, and then roam the boat and find nothing. They will smell nothing. Did they bring dogs to your boat this morning? Yes, not 20 minutes after you had gone. I was about to pull away from the dock when the soldiers appeared and ordered me to halt. They came aboard, searched, found nothing. By then, of course, I had the handkerchief. If I had not, well... His voice trailed off, and he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. If she had not found the packet where Mr. Rosen had dropped it, if she had not run through the woods, if the soldiers had taken the basket, if she had not reached the boat in time, all of the ifs whirled in Anne-Marie's head. "They are safe in Sweden now?" she asked. "You're sure?" Uncle Henrik stood and patted the cow's head. "I saw them ashore. There were people waiting to take them to shelter. They are quite safe there. But what if the Nazis invade Sweden? Will the Rosens have to run away again? That won't happen. For reasons of their own, the Nazis want Sweden to remain free. It is very complicated." Anne-Marie's thoughts turned to her friends, hiding under the deck of the Ingeborg. "It must have been awful for them. So many hours there," she murmured. "Was it dark in the hiding place?" "Dark and cold, and very cramped. And Mrs. Rosen was seasick, even though we were not on the water very long. It is a short distance, as you know. But they are courageous people, and none of that mattered when they stepped ashore. The air was fresh and cool in Sweden. The wind was blowing. The baby was beginning to wake as I said goodbye to them." "I wonder if I will ever see Ellen again," Anne-Marie said sadly. "You will, little one. You saved her life, after all. Someday you will find her again. Someday the war will end," Uncle Henrik said. "All wars do. Now then," he added, stretching, "that was quite a milking lesson, was it not?" Analyze the text. Cause and effect. What would have happened if Anne-Marie had not delivered the handkerchief to Uncle Henrik in time? For further reading,